Okay. Next up, item number 10 is our Take Back Our Communities program presentation relating to the impacts of AB 109, Proposition 47, and the anticipated impacts of Prop 57 is going to be coming our way. And Chris and Chief Rosales to report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council Public. I know it's late, but I think this topic is worthy of us trying to spend a little more energy, trying to stay awake and part to it. The report I'm going to give is sort of an announcement of a program that we are trying to launch in San Gabriel Valley after a number of cities, city managers in consultation with their police chiefs have decided that we needed sort of a unified program and message to educate our community, our legislative bodies, but also really start a focus towards the future, towards how we can make some needed changes to what we see as a degradation of the criminal justice system in terms of the pendulum is going too far in one direction, and we're starting to see the negative impacts, and are concerned that those negative impacts are only going to escalate over the next few years as these pieces of legislation and other legislation that's in the hopper right now in Sacramento come to fruition. So it's called Take Back Our Community. And it starts with a little history to this, what started AB 109, which was a result of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that California needed to reduce its overcrowding in its state prisons, which at the time were about 138% of design capacity. And this was an effort that took many years. And the state of California just ran out of options after the Supreme Court just put its foot down and said, either you build more prisons or you reduce the population moving forward. That caused the state to reduce about 34,000 individuals into local communities from that. In response to that mandate, the state also made a decision to begin redesigning the criminal justice system in such a way as to reduce that prison population not only at that point, but moving forward so that the prison population wouldn't re-escalate back into a problem counter to the Supreme Court. So primarily, that was AB 109, which transferred a number of prisoners from state prison to local jail facilities. Then Prop 47 was approved by the voters, which reclassified and downgraded a number of crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. And most recently with Prop 57, which is now loosened and the rules for parole and of state prisoners now that may release up to an additional 30,000 criminals from prison for, quote, nonviolent felonies. And I'll touch on that definition because that's a critical definition that is part of the problem I think both public safety sees on many levels is the definition of what is a violent felony versus what's a nonviolent felony. So just as some key factors to what AB 109 was, it shifted the responsibility for housing and supervising non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual, the three N's, from state to county. And so before, individuals were housed in state prison. They were supervised by state parole agents. And a violation, if you were on parole, meant that you went back to prison for a year from that. After that, these non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual offenders are now housed at county jails, are supervised by county probation departments, and in violation of parole or their probation is what's called a flash incarceration for up to 10 days. And there's a max number of times that can occur. And I think as the chief can testify, it's sometimes hard to get a flash incarceration just because either county jail is full or the probation officers don't feel that the violation is sufficient enough to do that. And that's an important thing because you'll see later on in this presentation that an individual that was on these flash incarcerations, flash holds, ultimately murdered a police officer recently from that, and it's a clear thing that that person under ABO before 109 would have been in prison rather than held temporarily and then released back into the communities. So here's some definitions of what's not a violent felony, and it's mind-boggling. Human trafficking involving a minor is not a violent felony. Hate crimes, arson on a forest land, assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, activation of participation in a street gang, exploding a destructive device with intent to cause injury isn't a violent crime. First-degree burglary is not a violent felony. Assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence, battery with a serious bodily injury, solicitation to commit murder is not a violent felony under our laws. Inflicting corporal injury on a child, rape, sodomy, oral copulation with an unconscious person or by use of a date rape drug is not a violent crime under our current process. I find this site both highly disturbing, but also very informative. The county probation department puts up on their list of people that they've lost track. And on this, you can actually go on and find out how these people are now in local control under the county probation and how AB 109 has caused this. So this individual was released from state prison to supervision under the Los Angeles County Probation Department back in 2016. Under this, and this is the county's words, these are not my words, so this is how the county defines it. Under the Governor's Public Safety Relinement Act of 2011, better known as Assembly Bill 109, responsibility for lower level offenders was shifted from the state to the Los Angeles County. Henson qualified for release to the supervision of probation under 109 because his current commitment, because that's the most recent crime is what they look at, not what the totality of the crimes are, was for carrying, in essence, a knife. And it's defined as non-serious, non-violent. His prior convictions was murder. And so this person has been defined as non-violent and therefore housed in county facilities. Local impacts from the state criminal justice system. Some of the criminal justice system changes made in California have been needed and necessary. Certainly a lot of the pendulum had swung through public initiatives and other processes which really didn't allow a lot of discretion. So in those cases where it probably could be warranted that somebody deserved a second chance or needed help or other assistance to correct the wrong behavior, really couldn't get that under some of the previous things. So I think both public safety and other individuals realize that some modification is good, but unfortunately it has gone too far and too quickly the other way. And that's also been complicated not only by AB 109, which is purely a legislative action, but by voter actions. And I think to some degree voters were duped by false and misleading ballot titles where money saved would go to schools or other types of programs. And that is not the case from that. In fact, these initiatives have made less of a deterrent for violent and career criminals, and it's created more victims as a result of that process. This is the case I was referring to. In February of 2017, Whittier police officer Keith Boyer was murdered by Michael Mejia. After being released from prison in April of 2016, Mejia violated the terms of his parole at least 4 times. And again, if you remember, prior to 109, any one of those violations would have sent him back to prison for up to a year. But due to those provisions under the new criminal justice system, he was not sent back to prison for violating his parole, but instead held on the flash hold incarcerations. And I think for a couple of those, he wasn't even held for the 10-day period. It was only for 4 or 5 days before the county had to release him because they didn't have room to hold him. Another case, in May of 2017, DeMarco Blake, an associate, violently assaulted a 73-year-old Torrance resident during a home invasion robbery. Blake had an outstanding murder warrant for his arrest in Colorado. As he was being arrested, a private citizen filming the incident asked Blake why he was in Torrance, and Blake replied, Prop 57. So again, the message is being spread to those that would do harm or violate the law that California is getting pretty lenient with the criminal justice system through 109, Prop 47, and we think now with Prop 57 as it begins to implement will be a further message to those people to do harm and impact our communities. This is a slide I took off of from what the sheriff has reported. And this represents cases where they have jurisdiction in an unincorporated area or contract cities. So basically for that 2.5-year period, this was the number of times that they rearrested people. So the first one is like twice. There was 12,347 people under Prop 47 that they arrested twice. And as you can go through that, you get over to there was 2 people that are arrested 31 times due to Prop 47. And you actually had one individual that was arrested 61 times due to Prop 47 from that. And really, Prop 47, the most of that is due to the $950 limitation process. So each incident, you can steal, shoplift up to $950 before, and it's still a misdemeanor, anything under $950, which is basically a cite and release out for an individual. And so to highlight that, this was another thing that the sheriff put together. So this individual, can't remember his name, Daniel Harris, who's been a homeless addict for years, said he didn't start stealing until Prop 47 reduced penalties. On Wednesday morning in the late November, Harris bragged about how he keeps thefts below the $950 threshold, taunting a nearby sheriff's deputy. The deputy had caught Harris with loot before, but never enough to really matter. I haven't really committed any felonies, don't plan on it. Though they're not felonies anymore, Arcos responded. No matter how many times I do it, Harris said with a laugh, just kidding. We have tried several times to get legislation that would do at least a calendar year total, and that has been thwarted in Sacramento from that because the fear is that once it becomes a felony, then they would end up back in state prison, and neither the governor or the leadership of the Sacramento are willing to do any new laws or adjustments in laws that would bring people back into state prison from that standpoint at this time. For us in Glendora, we've had a 4% increase in violent and property crimes over a year period when we look at 2016 to 2015. That has meant that there's been 50 more victims of crime in our community during that year. Throughout California, the state says that they saw a 10% increase in violent crime and with an 8% increase in property crimes. So that's resulted in over 15,000 more victims to violent crime and 77,000 more victims of property-related crimes as a result of AB 109 and Prop 47. Certainly, we are seeing in our discussions with other San Gabriel Valley cities similar reports of crimes anywhere from 4 to 10% for violent and property-related crimes in those communities. Hence why we've started this program and why we're bringing it out to get it aware so what people can do. So again, this was sort of started by Arcadia, Glendora, Monrovia, and Whittier as a way to say enough is enough, that we need to start educating our state leaders. More importantly, start educating our community that they need to get involved, that this is something that is growing and is only going to get more dangerous and have ultimately an impact on communities' quality of life, no matter how you look at it, as we become more victims to unnecessary crimes from these pieces of legislation. We're providing, the idea of the program is to provide a consistent message so that our message has a louder volume. So when we're talking to Sacramento and other people that we need to talk to, the message is as loud as it can be. It's advocating for state legislation changes that will help improve local government's ability to respond to this criminal activity. And as I said, most importantly, engaging and enlisting our residents to help and take back our communities and make them safe again. The program creates a consistent public outreach and educational material. We're also developing ways for us to start the legislative fix. I know the chief has been involved through the LA chiefs, the Cal chiefs, and other organizations of looking at those fixes and talking to the legislature. I know in our packet here we're talking about supporting the City of Whittier's resolution that'll be on the League of California Cities docket for consideration at their annual conference to start setting up committees, a group that can help work with the league to amplify that voice and make the changes that are going to be necessary. Again, it's going to be somewhat hard because two of these initiatives are voter approved, and the changes really are limited to what Sacramento can do with those, and ultimately it's going to require us to think about going back to the voters for fixes so that we can make rational changes to the criminal justice system that certainly address the needs for improvement, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in the process, as what currently is happening. Also, it will create an ongoing coalition of cities that will consistently monitor and advocate. And again, I want to stress that this is a multi-year process. It's not going to be changed by one legislative session or not. It's a message that's going to have to be continually grounded and talked about and can't lose its enthusiasm as we move forward because of the importance and just the process it's going to take to make these changes. Every city manager in the San Gabriel Valley has now been provided with Take Our Back Community template. In the documents is a trifold, as I've put in here, that talks about overall the state, but also the local community that the city manager represents, what's happening in their community. It gives a brief overview of what these AB 109, 47, and 57 can do. And then it also has a letter that can be used by residents and businesses and other people of interest to send to our local state representatives to express that this is an important topic and it needs to be addressed, and that it gives them a way to focus that energy as we go forward from that. We're also working on a marketing plan with a professional marketing group to help do video or other types of social media outreach programs. So again, our message is consistent, it's to the point, and it's easy for both the layperson, but also our state representatives to understand what our message is and what needs to be done to do that. So that's our Take Back Our Community. As I said, it's a long process. I know the chief's here to give a perspective from public safety as we go forward. Also, tonight, we are asking for the council to provide direction, either allow us to write a letter of support to Whittier that they can present at the league in connection with their resolution. I think that that's an important first step for us to show unity and for the league to hear this process. I think one of the things that we have found out in our dialogue with the league is that the concern about this is not statewide. And we don't know whether that's because not all the communities are feeling the same pinch as like LA County is. I know Orange County is. I know Inland Empire is feeling this. But some of the northern county cities, they may not be feeling it just because they may not have gotten as many released people from 109 and 47 back. We don't know. But it's important for us to have that first step of dialogue to understand why they don't see it as a hot button issue as we do, at least in LA County, on this topic for a process. With that, Chief, if you have anything.
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you to the city manager. Can you hear me? Now I'm back on again. First, I want to say thank you to the city manager. I had mentioned this the other day at that meeting. It's not very many times where, at least in my career, where I see a city manager who has the knowledge and understanding of what it takes to do law enforcement, to continue to enforce the laws, but more so to protect our community. And so I want to thank him and the other city managers who have come forward. I mean, they really have a good understanding. Seeing where this has been unfolding for the last 2 months, the city manager has really been a driving force with the other city managers to get this going. From my perspective, one of the things I wanted to share with you is that when you look at these numbers, especially on the slide where it talks about the consequences, you know, if you were to add these numbers up, we look at close to, 30,000 folks. And from the perspective of municipal policing, who's the people out there that are enforcing this? Although it says it's going to the county, from the state to the county, it really is coming to municipal policing and our officers out in the street. One thing I can tell you, just in the 6 months that I've been here in Glendora, is that, and I've seen this in other cities where they're saying this is just crazy, this is a revolving door. These numbers really show that this is a revolving door. And some police officers are having a difficult time because you feel like you're going out there and you arrest someone and you're back at it 1 or 2 days later. In one case, a neighboring city ended up arresting someone 14 times within like a 2 or 3 day period. And that's just, unacceptable for kind of looking at public safety. For Glendora, our folks out in the field, they're really our first line defense in regards to this. Regarding the different propositions in the assembly bills, I do agree, and the city manager did a great job really analyzing it and saying that as chiefs and as police departments, we agree that there needs to be some changes. However, it's been so far, swung to one side of the pendulum that all these propositions, and there's some other ones that are coming afoot as well that are not mentioned in here, that are going to cause us some concern as far as making sure that we're maintaining the accountability of the folks. In regards to the flash incarceration, it's interesting because they can get anywhere between 1 to 10 days service back, and I kind of smile whenever I hear that because I think about, when our kids were small and we give them time out or have them sit in a chair, and that's kind of what this reminds me of. Is putting these folks on a timeout when they really should be away for a year so they're not committing more violent felonies. I could go on, and I will stop at that point, but I do urge that we do support this. I think the campaign is a really great campaign. We've laid it out nicely where even for Glendora, everything once it rolls out, really everybody will have all the templates. You won't have to look up all the information. Everything will be there at your disposal, and some of them will be pull-down screens so that it'll make it easier for people to send that information out. So thank you for listening, though. Appreciate it.
Okay, with that, I'll bring it back for questions. Karen?
Thank you very much to both of you. And yes, definitely, we need to support this. And I think, the ramifications of this are just so widespread that some of the folks who were well-intended to try to get people help have done the very opposite. A board I sit on for drug and alcohol dependency, the attendance at those programs dropped off considerably after this because there was no consequence for people to go to classes or go to treatment. So the idea that, we want to let people out of jail so they can go and get the help, well, they're not doing that because there's no consequence to it. So the ramifications are just widespread. And so for the drug dependency and even alcohol dependency, it's just part of that cycle that's leading to that revolving door of repeat offenders. So thank you to our community and the other communities partnering with you to take the lead in this.
Judy?
Well, I echo the thanks because this is a super serious problem, and I'm really glad the city managers stepped up so quickly, and I see this spreading and getting picked up by many others. The San Gabriel Valley COG had it on their agenda at the July meeting and unanimously voted to support the program. And so that's 31 cities on board, which is very important. One of the things that they suggested was removing a word from wherever it was mentioned in here, and that was with consequences, negative consequences are called unintended. And actually, there was so much information out there from the chiefs and many other people that there would be consequences that the COG voted or said that that word unintended should be removed because there was plenty of knowledge. One of my concerns is, as you said, Chief, that there's more bills coming out, or at least probably will be. The names on these three that passed, Public Safety and Realignment Act, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, and the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. The titles on these is so different from what they actually are. And if we can get a public education program where people can become better informed about what they're voting for. I know in Claremont for Prop 57, the council adopted an opposed position, and after that, they were bombarded by people coming into the meetings saying that they wanted that position to be reversed because they understood the bill was going to do different than what it is. So there's a lot of public education to do. On the trifold, there's no specific legislation mentioned. So when we advocate to our legislators, we're just saying we've got a problem, but we don't have specific solutions or suggestions.
At this point, we don't. And I know, some of this is going on with lobbying by the public safety elements, not only police and sheriffs, but district attorneys' office and some other people trying to do it. I mean, the first thing that we're hearing, and I'm sure the mayor was going to mention this, we had a meeting with one of our state reps, and her message was, well, you have to give me facts. And that sets me off because when I go through my list of nonviolent crimes, I said, well, why can't we agree that date rape is a violent crime? Why do I need to tell you that I've had one or two of those? Why can't we just say that if you commit that, that's a violent crime? Why do I need to educate somebody about that? Why do I need to educate if I hire somebody to try to go whack my spouse, no intent, that's a violent crime? But, so it's that. I mean, if we can't even start to agree with what is, I think, common sense, then it doesn't matter what laws we put in. We have to start educating that the pendulum has gone too far, that some of the things that Councilmember Davis was pointing in, prior to Prop 47, we had one of the, I think, best drug rehabilitation incentives for people because it gave them consequences. You can either go to county jail or you get rehab. And with Prop 47 decriminalizing that, it took away that tool from that standpoint. And as you saw that one individual who's a drug addict, he has no incentive to get cleaned up. He has every incentive to continue to shoplift up to $949 each time. And from that. So right now we don't have a package of that because we're just trying to educate people, and especially our state leaders. We got to make these changes. We have to start agreeing what is safe and what is not safe before we can start saying, okay, now this is how it needs to get tweaked.
So at the Contract Cities Convention, 4 months ago, there was the a state senator and an assembly member who spoke during lunch. And the state senator said that he had no knowledge of increased crime. He completely denied it, that there wasn't a problem as a result of this. There is a lot of education to be done, or to a removal of denial. And
You
then
know, if I may too, I want to add this because we talked about this with the Chiefs group, and this is where the passion for me comes in, is that what we have to remember in all this is that we're talking about victims. And you look at the nons and the lists that come up here. I mean, I look at these things and I think about and reflect upon the times where I worked as a detective and dealt with these victims. And I remember telling several of the victims that sat before me, we're going to get justice, we're going to get justice, stick with it, because it's hard for these victims. And now we're not getting justice for them. And so I want to make sure that I was remiss earlier by not mentioning the victims, because that's what this really is about. These are true victims. And we talked about this at the chief's level. What we need to start doing is, and it's hard for these victims to come forward, is start bringing them and carting them all the way up to Sacramento and say, tell your story.
we have to, because it's not getting through. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, it seems to me it would just be logical that part of the homeless problem is because of all of these criminals being released with no place to go and no money. And the homeless problem all of a sudden has just boomed about the same time. So I think there's a big link. Thank you.
Questions? Michael, go ahead.
Chris, your passion is over the top, and I commend you for it. It really, really shows. And Chief, again, you've done a great job with this as well. I have a couple questions. What happened to 3 strikes?
That went out.
It's gone? Okay. I think that it's almost naive of us to think that it's just an education process or problem, because there's a political aspect to this. Their leadership up there obviously wants us. They push it down our throats. They labeled it with candy, if you will. And to go back up there and try to educate them on something that they're already planted in the ground because that's what leadership wants, it's a different tack besides education. They know full well what a violent crime is. We don't have to educate them. If they're that incompetent and not knowing that, they need to be replaced. So it's a political issue. So I think there has to be more of a focus on political. Now back to Judy's question of when we can have a packet, maybe before we even have a packet while you're working on that, is there a possibility we can get some letters or some language that we can carry ourselves with our contacts and create a stir at our level, pushing back while you're developing your packet to help support you folks? A one-pager that would be very, very helpful. And in addition to that request, this that you put, this PowerPoint you put together, is it possible to put that onto the website with a link sent to us so we can put it on our Facebook pages, we can send it to our legislators, and we can create havoc like Glendora is known to do? We have a great reputation out there because we do push back and we get listened to. And it's commented back on a regular basis when we go to events, and all of us go to events. They recognize Glendora as either being leaders, pain in the you-know-what, or pushing back, but I wear that with a badge of honor because of what my predecessors have done and what we're continuing to do. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. So if you can give us some tools, I would love to help support your passion, which should be everybody's passion. And again, I'm heartfelt with the amount of energy you're putting towards this, because I think it's very important and people really need to be aware, because I have a family, most of us have families, and we would hate to have this happen to one of our family members. We don't think about ourselves, but to come home and have your son or your daughter have an issue, I'd go crazy, absolutely go crazy. And I wouldn't want to be, I would hope no one would make me accountable for my actions at that point in time, and no one should be pushed to that level. So please, give us some tools in the short term so we can help your efforts to help the society's efforts. Thank you.
Randall?
Well, I have nothing really more to say, because what's been said is, echoes from my heart. Excellent job by both of you, really. You did a bang-up job. And the victims are absolutely what we need to think about. And I think about my grandkids. Their parents and my wife and I, we try to teach them right and wrong, but it seems like what's right and wrong is not right and wrong now from the era that we all grew up in. And we need to stand up and do exactly what you all have said. So you've got my support, and I echo what's been said, and anything that you can give us that will help us to convey this. This is really an important thing, and great job. Thank you.
Just ditto everything everyone else has said, and the question I have is, this is probably one of the most important topics that we've discussed since I've been on the council. Is it possible to take this part of this meeting and separate it when we have the meetings online? Because for somebody to sit through 3 hours of a meeting and then watch this, I would love to see us be able to separate this and have this as an item all on its own for everybody to take a look at this. So if we could do that, I think that'd be important to do. But my only question then is, what can we do to help? What do you need from us?
Well, I'm hoping a couple of things. One is, and I think I'm hearing it, is to officially bless the Take Back Our Community effort program. I think on pages 23.
Karen will take care of that.
On your last 3 pages or 4 pages of your staff report, I'm hoping that that's at least the beginning of a fact sheet. The sample letter that we need to have people start circulating, and then sort of a trifold, as I mentioned, that gives a little more facts, but also talks more specifically about what's happening in Glendora, so that you have those things. I think, so it's adoption of those, and those will be amended as this program comes forth. But also support for the City of Whittier's resolution that'll be at the League, I think, is an important one to help support our fellow cities. But I think what they have outlined as far as the next steps on a state level is the right direction moving forward.
And did I miss it? You also wanted a financial contribution.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's going to be. I think right now for that marketing, we're probably looking at somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 is our contribution. So if you will formally bless that as another adoption.
Yeah, this is a request for all the cities to participate, so there
Right.
can be a big outreach. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, just to follow the agenda that Kathleen has been so good to put together for me, I need to open public comment. Don't have anybody? We'll close public comment. Gary, got anything to say? Okay, good. Go ahead and close public comment, bring it back for any additional discussion.
I think along the lines of the chief's comment about victims, I think, for domestic violence to be considered nonviolent, we don't have to look any farther than the last 48 hours and the young pregnant mother of 3 who was allegedly murdered by a repeat offender of domestic violence. I think that speaks pretty clearly. So, anyway.
Okay, so with this, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson and a second by Councilwoman Davis to, what are we actually voting on here?
You're supporting,
Supporting the
Take
Take Back Our Communities program. If everybody would please vote. And if that doesn't pass 5-0, I'm out of here. Okay, 5-0. Okay, guys, thank you all very much.